Eating disorders affect millions of people each year. They are one of the deadliest mental illnesses, according to research by JAMA. News 4's Kinsley Centers introduces us to a clinical psychologist who breaks down the signs and symptoms that could save you or a loved one's life.
Eating disorders are a mental illness that can be fatal. The National Institute of Mental Health says a common misconception of disordered eating is that it is labeled as a lifestyle choice, but that is not the case. Joining me now to talk about disordered eating is clinical psychologist Dr. Josh Claypo. Dr. Claypo, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us, what exactly is an eating disorder? What are some of the signs and symptoms people need to be aware of?
Well, it can be very tricky to sort of point it out because we are a society that is very focused on health and nutrition and body weight and things like that. And so there's this line that really exists between people who are watching what they eat, watching the nutritional content of what they're eating, and disordered eating. And really, there are some telltale signs that will tell you of which side of that equation you're on. So things like very rigid eating, and rigid meaning not just certain foods, but certain amounts of foods, literally down to the numbers of carrots or peas or the size of the food on the plate. Another one is what we call ritualistic eating, only being able to eat either not just at a certain time, but in a certain way, certain foods that you have to take in, foods that can't touch each other. The other thing is, believe it or not, and this sounds a little bit like substance use, is eating alone or not eating in social situations, not wanting to sort of deal with or interact around that. And then the final one, which we're kind of familiar with, particularly with anorexia, is significant weight loss when there is not an illness and there is not a diet going on. That being said, let me say this quickly, that not all disordered eating or eating disorders involve dramatic weight loss. We can think of things like bulimia or binge purge disorders.
Dr. Claypo, can you tell us, have you seen an increase specifically here in Alabama of disordered eating?
Well, absolutely. We know that nationally during the pandemic, the number of teenage girls or young women presenting to emergency rooms across the country doubled during the pandemic. In Alabama, we haven't seen any more of a significant increase, but across the board we have. It's another point that let me make is, while most eating disorders are associated with women, and more women than men have eating disorders, men do have eating disorders or disordered eating. They absolutely can have anorexia, bulimia, and the like. But the ratio of women, or the percentage of women versus men, is about 90% women to about 10% men.
Dr. Claypo, before we go, where can people get more information and how can people contact you?
I encourage people to go to the National Eating Disorders webpage, nationaleatingdisorders.org. I also encourage people, particularly if you're parents and you have a young one and you are concerned about that weight loss or eating rituals, please go see your pediatrician. You can always contact your primary care physician, and you can always contact a mental health professional. And the thing that's really important about that is there may not be an eating disorder, but you're much better off to have it checked out to see, because the earlier that we can intervene, the better. People can always reach me at my webpage is joshclaypo.com, or my email askdrjoshk@gmail.com.
Dr. Claypo, unfortunately, that's our time. But again, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Well, that nationwide increase mentioned is also seen right here in the Wiregrass. Jessie White is a nutritionist in Dothan. She says eating disorders can affect any age, even children. She gives some advice if your child is experiencing disordered eating.
Eating disorders can start really, really young. I've seen as early as 4 years old. Separation of food and emotion and what the body is actually needing. I think education is always the best place to start, to really see what the body needs and what you need emotionally.
Well, you can view more resources on our website. That's WTVY.com.